I have been playing the organ since I was 9 years old, and I started off as a theater organist, and then of course I did all my classic studies and did my master's degree and doctorate studies at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and within that, of course, was beginning to play in churches by a very young age. By 10, I was playing mass, and between the playing theater organ at a young age in pizza parlors and big old silent movie houses, and playing in church, I feel I got a little warped in how I view the organ, and
Well, that'll do playing, or we'll do that to you anyway. But
absolutely right. But I always had this side feeling about the instrument that at times in our classical world of organ, we tend to maybe even subconsciously and accidentally lose touch with folks who are listening to the instrument, that the instrument can sound funeral-esque and somber. Even in our most grand literature, it can sometimes lose normal music listeners, even musicians that aren't organists. And so I've always had this thing in me as a kid that enjoyed making people excited when they heard the organ, or surprised because they got a perspective of the instrument that didn't fit their preconceived notion of what the instrument is supposed to sound like, or what it's supposed to do, or what music it plays, or where it plays, or those kinds of things. So really, in the early 2000s, I found my way actually back onto the theater organ, and I had done everything I could possibly do to run away from the theater organ when I really became intensely involved in the classic organ and the church instrument, if you will, because I realized very early on that being a theater organist drug at my clout as an organist in the world of organists and in the American Guild of Organists and whatnot, and it became damaging when somebody knew I had that skill, to be honest. So I got very quiet about it for many years. I didn't play the theater organ from age 18 all the way to 2007. I had started playing the theater organ again in like 2007, and I just got booked to do a few concerts because there were folks in Colorado who still knew I did that, and I was very hesitant at that time to get back on the theater organ bench. Nonetheless, I did, and I realized that though I hadn't done that in a long time, I just had a blast. It just kind of awakened this sense of, wow, I can really bust out and do different things with this other instrument again. And not only that, but because I had all this training as the classical organist over all these years prior, suddenly I was a monster on the theater organ, and I was playing it in ways that I never had when I was much younger, and that just kind of shook me in my foundations again with the organ, and reminded me that this is an instrument that gets put in the corner too often. And then in the right around the mid 2000s again, maybe earlier 2000s, I started to discover organs that were highly, highly MIDI capable, musical instrument, digital interface. And at that time, admittedly, some of the sounds still weren't real quality. Like, you could
sound sampling wasn't what it is.
Right. And you could hear the imperfection. And so it wasn't terribly tempting to me yet. It was kind of fun. You could mess with a piece and add, some strings or something, and do something that just kind of added some fun, but it just didn't feel legitimate to me yet. But over the especially last 10 years, the quality of sound sampling and creation and output in many of the digital instruments, really especially Rogers instruments, in my opinion, and their modules and their capabilities of working with MIDI in terms of how they integrate MIDI in working with the organ. In other words, seamlessly, just like all the stops, in pistons and whatnot, is so smooth that it really just kind of started to drag me in and say, try something with this. And where it really started, there's a church in Denver here called South Broadway Christian, and they were one of the first to install one of these big instruments with the latest, at that time, MIDI technology. And they asked me to come and play a Halloween concert about 10 years ago now. And I thought, well, okay, that'll be fun. I'll play a Halloween concert. And I thought, well, this instrument has some weird possibilities. I might be able to have a little fun. I mean, it's Halloween, so I didn't have to take that too seriously. I could make it a fun concert. And that began my real delve into using the organ in different ways and using MIDI technology in a very high manner. I found myself gravitating towards orchestral works, true great orchestral works. And so this program this week will actually feature Mussorgsky's Night on Bald Mountain, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. There's even an old arrangement by Porter Heaps and Lloyd Nolan that was called Swinging Bach, and it was for Hammonds long time ago, and it's kind of kitschy and it has a Begin section and it has a jazz section and kind of a big band section, but it was written to be played on Hammonds in probably around the 50s or maybe even 60s.
The drawbar organ.
Right, on drawbar organs. And I thought, well, why not orchestrate this and make this a blast? And so I'm literally making this an orchestration for that piece, and it's grand. It makes it's a total tongue-in-cheek presentation of Bach's Toccata in D minor.
Now you're playing this recital at First Plymouth Congregational, and I see you're playing my piece, Toccata in Boogie.
Yes,
the first person I know of to play this toccata from American Suite.
Well, it's very awesome, and let me tell you how it found its way into the program too. The program starts with Night on Bald Mountain, which is out and out orchestral and sounds orchestral, and then I play Cesar Franck's Chorale in A minor, which has very toccata-like elements in spots of the music.
Starts off with
with it, and so it kind of has those elements, and it's a grand piece, ending of course in A minor, but or A major actually on the A major chord. But the point was, well, how do I get now out of this kind of, because I wanted to get to Porter Heaps and Lloyd Nolan's Toccata, which is very tongue-in-cheek, almost humorous. I mean, it had very light and fluffy piece. And I thought, how am I going to get from Franck to this other piece, which is literally humorous? And your Toccata in Boogie, I had remembered, has a sense of legitimacy in traditional organ scoring, yet fun and a bit of that poking at just a little bit of maybe outside the envelope with a little bit of fun and a little smile that we don't typically think about with organ music. And so I thought, well, that's a great transition piece because it'll have seriousness and clout about serious organ music, and yet it'll start to push us out of thinking that the organ can't do wild and maybe funny things even. So there was kind of a thread in, packaging this so that the listener hears the organ at the very beginning doing orchestral music, classic orchestral music, but yet nonetheless not organ music, and taking the listener through very legitimate music and maybe some even humor in just the first half alone.
Let's listen to Toccata in Boogie.
Yes. Well, I find the piece tremendously fun. I love the big chunky chords in juxtaposition, and the playfulness of the piece, and somehow holding the fact that this is a piece of organ music of seriousness all at the same time. That's why I really like the piece. It has got character, which can allow the listener to go beyond what we think of the organ and yet present some fun through rhythm and boogie, which is not a term we would ever think about with the organ. And yet it's so good, it's so full of life. It's a dance. And that pedal solo right there is great. 32 Foot's Boogie.
This must be a triumph of yours of sorts, to be asked to come back and play the organ that you designed.
I'm very excited about it. It's been so nice. This is actually the second time in my life where I got to. Last time I consulted for a large organ was a big tracker organ in Kentucky, built by Fritz Nowak, and it was a stunning instrument. But I literally helped design the instrument and signed off on the contract and left before it even came. And I got to go back and dedicate that instrument too, but I didn't lead one Sunday worship on it. It kind of stuck with me for years. So it was nice. I did have the instrument at First Plymouth under my hands for about a year and a half, but it is really wonderful to come back and do the rededication of the instrument, because it is a grand instrument, a really wonderful instrument, and the potentials are just massive.
Well, we're with Frank Perko the third. I hope you don't mind if I call you FP3.
It's great. Actually, I love my third, so it's very important to me, and I've actually had other people call me FP3.
It's just great to have you here.